And then I do know that the result of that shift or that decision process to go in a slightly different direction then takes time to unfold. It's like going out there and planting something in the garden and then waiting till it grows and blooms and becomes a flower. There's an unfoldment time and a process that takes place. And as we start living our lives more and more according to that decision process that we made, then this overall change takes place within our lives. Our lives start to shape differently. They start to form differently. Different people come into our lives. We start moving in different directions, and sometimes our old habits don't want to let off. They sit there to kind of hold us back. We get entrenched in them. But as best we can, if we're continuing on the new process, there'll always be a force, something that takes place that finally allows those things to drop off. And what was interesting to me is the scripture this morning as Reverend Ken was reading it. I've always liked that particular scripture, but it's never had a great deal of meaning to me. And all of a sudden this morning, wow, there's all this meaning that's running out all over the place on me. And so now it's I would say I made a decision process there this morning that this may be one of my favorite pieces of scripture. Not that it hasn't always been pleasant or nice, but it's not one of those that I really, and throughout my life there's always been certain pieces of scripture at one time or another that were very significant that I held to. And I see now this thing as I got to see more meaning to it, or at least it was more meaningful to me this morning. And I'm not saying that makes it more meaningful to anyone else, but I'm just saying that as we go on and we have this evolutionary process, this thing that happens within us, and as we grow and move in what I would call other directions or become more expansive, whatever it is, things like this happen. Is that something that's always been there, always sitting there, all of a sudden has greater significance to us. And we see more in it. We're closer to it. So now I'm going to go running through all of that. I want to go back to a couple of things in the discussion here. I had an individual this week that I don't see him very often, but I did see him again, and he chose this as an opportunity for him to convert me to his brand of Christianity, which, and what the discussion is about and why it's helpful to me when I engage in those types of things is I get to see where another individual is coming from, and I get to see their mindset. Now, he and I had a discussion, I'd say almost a year ago. And so I got to take a look at where he was at from a year ago to now. And there was no change. What had changed is my approach to what it was that he was doing. And I'm not saying that my approach then was more kindly or less kindly, it was just different. And so he is one of those individuals that is part of a church, and in the title of that church is the name of Christ. And he is one of those individuals that firmly believes that unless you're part of his church, that you of course can't see heaven or God or be saved in the end. And of course he's terribly concerned about me and my soul because I'm not on the rostrum of their church. I'm actually doing something else, and he's very concerned about my salvation. But part of his perception of me has always been that I was Catholic. Now that was not discussed last time, but that's how he began his approach, was this absolute assertion that I am Catholic in my beliefs. And his church has a divergence from Catholicism, but a lot of the beliefs are the same. And so after he went on for 10 minutes or so, I stopped and I said, you believe that I'm Catholic? And he said, yes. And I said, I'm not. And there was this pause, like, so, what does it do? Because he starts an argument based upon a certain foundation, right? And then that foundation is wrong. So now he regroups and goes back at it, and so then the argument became, well, whatever it is you're involved with, this particular church is the right church because it has the name of Christ in it, and if it didn't have the name of Christ in it, it couldn't be the right church. It must have, as the title, the name Christ in it, and they were formulated in 1943, and I told him, I said, you were founded in 1943. What happens to all of the people that existed before that? And he's, and what about the apostles? And, I'm sorry, Jesus didn't have a church. He did, he does, he just, anyway, came to the end of our ride, and he was in the same spot that he was. But what was different is that I left him this time thinking about what he was trying to say, and working with the problem that he had made judgments about where certain people were, and I'm sure that the discussion will come up again. So then yesterday, I have another individual that, we've seen from time to time, and he has problems going on within his family, but, he came to talk to me, and in the end of the discussion, the last half hour, we somehow got off on religion. And the last time I left him off, he had a lot of questions. Not much in the way of understanding, and it's a couple years ago that he and I talked. But he just always had questions. And what's happened now in the last 2 years is he's done a lot of reading.